Hi everyone. Right now in 2026, Need for Speed is a 100 million copy selling 30-year-old franchise that's been rebooted, relaunched, and reinvented more times than a boy band. It's done everything from anime-styled night races to cheesy Hollywood tie-ins, and Criterion Games, the folks behind Burnout, are calling the shots these days. But roll the clock back 3 decades and none of that existed. No neon-soaked city streets, no blasting car chases with Linkin Park knockoffs, no street racer scene. Just one weird little disc for a console almost nobody owned, with a name so confident it basically dared you to disagree with it. So let's rewind, back to 1994. Let's talk about the game that started it all, and honestly, the game that current Need for Speed barely even resembles anymore. Here's something people always miss. Need for Speed didn't just appear out of thin air. The series came from Distinctive Software, a Vancouver game studio that EA snapped up back in 1991, years before Need for Speed launched. Inside EA, the team went by Pioneer Productions, which honestly sounds more like a space mission than a racing game studio. Still, EA handed them the wheel for their first shot out of the gate. And honestly, that's some wild confidence. But these weren't racing rookies. Before all this, they'd already worked on the Test Drive series. So when EA wanted a rival for Test Drive, they just had the same folks basically make a sequel to their earlier game. That's the game industry. One big loop of reinvention, especially in the mid-90s. The full title of the game is Road and Track presents The Need for Speed. Road and Track, as in your dad's favorite car magazine. They partnered up and gave EA real specs about the cars that showed up in the game. Pretty clever for 1994. Throw a respected magazine on the cover and suddenly your arcade race game feels official and almost serious. It clearly worked, even if the title makes it sound a bit like you're about to watch a how-to video on changing spark plugs. Now here's where it gets messy, because in true 90s fashion, this game didn't just release, it rolled out in stages, like a fast food chain testing a new burger region by region. So first up, December 24th, 1994, on the Panasonic 3DO. If you just paused and thought, wait, what's a 3DO? You're not alone. Hardly anyone remembers it. The 3DO was supposed to be this high-end, next-level console, but honestly, most people only remember it as one of gaming's most famous flops. So right out of the gate, Need for Speed showed up on a platform with long-shot odds. A year later, in 1995, it made its way to the PC. Then in 1996, Need for Speed finally rolled onto the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, systems which people actually owned. Plus, there was a special edition in '96 only for PC with a couple extra tracks and some tweaks under the hood. Long story short, depending on where you lived and what console you had, your first time playing Need for Speed could have happened anywhere from 1994 to 1997. No single big launch day. Just a slow, multi-year rollout that crept across platforms and regions. So what did you actually get for your money? 8 cars. Seriously, just 8. In 2026, 8 cars feels like the stuff the game throws at you before it lets you anywhere near the buy now button. But back in 1994, pulling in 8 real sports cars, each fully modeled, was a big thing. You get a Dodge Viper, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, Corvette, Mazda RX-7, Toyota Super Turbo, and the Acura NSX. Even today, that's a solid Friday night car meet. The lineup still holds up, and nothing embarrassing there. Guys at EA in '94 had a killer taste with supercars. And since Road and Track had their fingerprints all over the project, this wasn't just a case of car fast, car shiny. Each car actually felt different. Handling, performance, sounds, even braking. That definitely wasn't the norm in the games back then. Most racing games then just slapped different paint jobs on the same go-kart physics, but this one made you feel the difference between a nimble NSX and a thundering Viper. And let's not forget, the '94 release is the only entry in the whole 20-plus game franchise that really tried to nail car handling with actual input from Road and Track's own drivers. Every NFS after this one just chased after fun and drifted away from realism. This game somehow tried to pull off both. There's this hilarious little detail that managed to survive every version of the game. You always had to manually shift out of neutral at the start. Yeah, even if you picked automatic transmission in the menu, The game's like, here's the comfort of automatic gears, but you're still doing the first shift. Basically, it's a metaphor for being an adult. So, what about the actual game structure? The original 3DO version gave you 3 realistically modeled point-to-point tracks. You could race against the clock or take on an actual opponent. And here's a weird twist. The other driver wasn't just some mute AI car. You went up against the X-Man, a dude who popped up in grainy full-motion videos to talk you up or talk you down depending on how you drove. Imagine finishing a race in '94 and getting personally roasted by a guy on something that looked like bootleg VHS tape. It's like the original toxic multiplayer lobby, only you didn't have voice chat yet. Here's the part that people tend to overlook in 2026. This game was a real technical showcase for the 3VO. I mean, its graphics and physics were honestly impressive for that hardware. Yeah, even while chugging along at around 20 frames per second. By today's standards, where people complain if a game isn't running at 144 FPS, that number sounds like a joke. But back in '94, that was as good as it got. This was cutting edge. What's even stranger, the 3DO version still stands out as the best looking one, even better than the later PlayStation and Saturn ports. And that's just not how things usually go. In gaming, the underdog system almost always gets the sloppy seconds, but here, for once, the underdog actually got the best version. Now about the legacy, this is where ahead of its time really means something. Nobody saw this coming in 1994. No one played the Need for Speed and thought, yeah, this'll turn into a giant franchise. It was just a solid, kind of niche racing sim stuck on a console nobody bought. And yet, here we are in 2026, and that little game, with its 8 cars and 3 tracks, is now the ancestor of the Need for Speed Unbound and Most Wanted, and of just about every street racing game that followed in the series. So here's the question you're actually here for. Does it hold up in 2026? As a piece of history, no doubt. But if you're hoping to fire it up after work and get a good half hour out of it, well, it's a bit of a stretch. The number of cars is tiny compared to what we get today. The tracks are over before you know it, and that weird quirk where you have to use manual shifting even if you pick automatic transmission, people would roast that in a Reddit patch notes thread these days. But here's what nobody can take away from it. Every single pillar of the modern Need for Speed identity, real licensed sports cars, real time of day racing, distinct handling per vehicle, all of that was already present in this one 1994 disc. This wasn't a rough draft that got thrown out. This was a blueprint that the entire franchise has been quietly tracing for 3 decades. And if you take a step back, it's almost hilarious. A car magazine team helped make a car video game before anyone was talking about brand synergies. Today, they'd roll out a press release about that kind of thing. Back in 1994, that was just a regular day at the office. That's the Need for Speed for you. 1994's big shot at making cars and games actually feel real. A small Vancouver studio EA swooped up made it happen with a little help from a legit car magazine. Honestly, it didn't make much noise at launch, but it ended up starting one of gaming's most enduring franchises. Just 8 cars and a few tracks and the unforgettable X-Man trash-talking through your TV speakers. Fast forward 30 years and over 20 sequels, and look at us here. We're still here, still racing because of this first game. So, what's your version of the Need for Speed? Were you there for the original, or did you jump in with the wild and neon-lit stuff in 2022? Drop your story in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into the games that help shape everything we play now, you know the drill. Hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.